The cameras were focused on smiles, but one microphone remained open long enough to catch a few broken words. They were quiet, incomplete, and almost buried beneath the ceremony, yet insiders immediately understood why Meghan suddenly looked toward Harry as though something forbidden had been exposed. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, because this quiet royal moment was about to uncover a secret the palace never wanted the public to hear. The recording did not capture a full sentence. There was no clear accusation, no raised voice, and no open confrontation. Only a few uncertain words spoken by Princess Anne to a trusted member of the family. Yet one fragment stood out above the noise. What was agreed? It was brief, but it carried the weight of a private condition, one that Meghan may have known about before she entered the ceremony. Her reaction made the words even more serious. Meghan turned toward Harry almost at once, searching his face for reassurance or an explanation. But Harry did not meet her eyes. He looked ahead and kept his expression controlled, suggesting that Anne's warning was not new to him. He may already have known that a private agreement had been broken, questioned, or quietly challenged before they arrived. Anne never spoke directly to Meghan. That was part of what made the moment so powerful. Inside the monarchy, the harshest messages are rarely delivered through loud arguments. They are sent through distance, silence, careful positioning, and witnesses chosen for a reason. By speaking to someone else while Meghan stood close enough to understand, Anne denied her the chance to answer without creating a public scene. A palace aide quickly moved forward, guiding guests toward the next formal stage of the ceremony. The interruption looked polite, but its purpose was clear. The moment had to be contained before anyone reacted too openly. Meghan leaned toward Harry and asked him something quietly. His reply was short. Whatever he said did not calm her. Instead, her expression became more guarded, as though the tension had started long before Anne walked past her. Anne remained composed. She did not look angry, surprised, or uncertain. That calmness suggested preparation. This was not a sudden emotional decision. It appeared to be a message delivered exactly as intended. Soon, rumors began moving among the staff. Some believed Meghan had brought something with her. Others claimed she had made a private request before the ceremony. A few whispered that she expected access to something the palace had already refused to release. And that changed everything. The silence was no longer about a greeting. It was about a private royal object Meghan believed she had the right to reclaim. The ignored greeting was becoming the least important part of the story, because behind Anne's warning stood a far more explosive question: what had Meghan come expecting to receive? Days before the ceremony, a request had reportedly reached the palace through private channels. It appeared simple: access to a personal item associated with Meghan's years inside the royal family. But the object carried memories, ownership disputes, and a secret Anne refused to overlook. The request concerned a royal jewel that Meghan had once worn during a period when her place inside the family still seemed secure. To the public, that earlier appearance had looked like acceptance. Some even assumed the piece had been given to her permanently. Inside the palace, however, the truth was more complicated. The jewel had never been formally gifted. It had remained under royal control, loaned for a specific duty, and tied to a role Meghan no longer performed. Meghan did not see it as a simple loan. To her, the piece represented a moment when she had felt welcomed rather than judged. It carried memories of her marriage, the future she once imagined for her children, and a time when she believed the monarchy might eventually become a true home. Asking for it again was not merely about wearing something valuable. It was about reclaiming a part of her story that she felt the palace had taken away. Harry supported the request. He argued that emotional meaning could not be erased by rules written in private offices. The jewel, he believed, had become linked to Meghan personally, regardless of who technically controlled it. But palace officials saw danger in that argument. Royal objects were never only personal. They represented service, rank, and approval. Allowing Meghan access could send a message the institution had not agreed to send. The request passed through intermediaries, protecting both sides from a direct argument while giving each time to prepare. That was when Anne became involved. She was trusted to defend family property without being softened by guilt, affection, or fear of headlines. Anne immediately questioned the timing. Why had the request arrived just before a major public appearance? Why did Meghan need temporary access now? Suspicion grew that the jewel was not meant to remain private. It might be worn before the cameras, creating photographs that could suggest forgiveness, renewed status, or royal support. The palace refused, but the refusal was not delivered with complete finality. Meghan attended the ceremony believing the decision might still be reversed. Perhaps Charles would intervene. Perhaps Harry's pressure had worked. Perhaps the object would be waiting. It was not. Before Meghan arrived, Anne had personally ordered the jewel removed from the collection she expected to access. Meghan had arrived believing the palace might still change its mind, but Anne had already made certain that the disputed piece could not reach her, and the reason went far beyond ownership. Before Meghan entered the building, the jewel had reportedly been taken from its usual secure location and transferred under Anne's authority. It was not hidden because of its value alone. Palace insiders feared what wearing it would allow Meghan to claim without speaking a single word. The piece was said to be instantly recognizable to those who understood royal history. It had links to marriage, female succession, and the approval of a senior royal woman whose influence still shaped the family long after her death. That made it more than an ornament. It was a symbol of belonging. Worn in public, it could suggest that Meghan had been welcomed back into the fold, that old wounds had healed, or that the crown still supported her in private. The palace feared exactly that message. A single appearance could create photographs powerful enough to overpower every careful statement issued before or after the ceremony. To the public, the jewel might look like reconciliation. To royal watchers, it could signal renewed status. To Anne, it would be something even more serious, a false claim made through royal property. Anne had never believed jewels were harmless decorations. Inside the monarchy, they carried memory, rank, duty, and permission. They could reward loyalty, mark acceptance, or remind the wearer that the institution still controlled the meaning behind the beauty. Allowing Meghan to wear this piece would not simply complete an outfit. It would rewrite the relationship between her and the crown. The transfer was arranged quietly. Only a few members of staff were told where the jewel had been moved, and no formal explanation was sent to Meghan's team. That silence made the refusal feel colder. From Meghan's side, the object had not merely been withheld. It had been deliberately removed before she could even make her case. Harry saw punishment in the decision. To him, the family was using valuable objects to control emotion, memory, and public identity. Anne saw his anger differently. She believed it proved he still refused to accept the difference between personal inheritance and institutional custody. Then another detail surfaced. The jewel may once have belonged to a woman whose memory remained deeply sensitive within the royal family. That possibility changed Meghan's understanding of Anne's role. Anne was not only guarding property. She might be protecting a promise made years earlier, one she considered more important than peace with Harry or Meghan. According to one insider, Anne had used a final argument when ordering the transfer. She had invoked the wishes of the late Queen. The argument was no longer between Anne and Meghan alone, because the moment the late Queen's wishes were invoked, every private grievance became a battle over who had the right to interpret the past. According to those familiar with the arrangement, the late Queen had never permanently denied Meghan the jewel, but she had attached a condition. It could only be worn under circumstances of trust, service, and unity. Anne believed that condition had not merely been broken. it had been publicly abandoned. The understanding was said to be simple inside the palace, even if it was never explained outside it. Meghan could wear certain royal pieces while representing the monarchy in an official role. The jewels were available because of duty, not because ownership had changed. Yet nothing was written for public release, and that silence created two very different versions of the same promise. Meghan remembered the Queen's warmth. She remembered private approval, moments of kindness, and the feeling that she had been trusted with something personal. To her, the loan carried emotional meaning. Even if the legal title remained with the Crown, the connection felt real. It became part of how she understood her place in the family. Anne saw it differently. Affection, in her view, could not erase the rules protecting royal property. A jewel might be offered with warmth, but it still belonged to an institution built on continuity. Personal feeling could not be allowed to change that. There were also claims that the Queen had asked Anne to protect certain emotionally sensitive pieces if family divisions ever became public. Anne treated that request as a command. She was not interested in whether Charles feared another scandal, whether Harry felt insulted, or whether advisors believed compromise would calm the headlines. To Anne, duty did not become optional simply because the consequences were painful. Charles worried that strict enforcement would deepen the family wound. William, however, supported caution. He feared that one exception could later be used as proof of private approval from the Crown. Harry rejected the entire argument. He believed the palace was using the Queen's memory to end a debate she could no longer enter. Because she was gone, no one could ask what she truly meant or whether her feelings had changed. For Meghan, that was the deepest injury. The refusal did not only take away a jewel. It seemed to rewrite her relationship with the Queen, stripping private affection of all meaning and replacing it with rules, conditions, and control. Anne's silent walk past Meghan now carried a sharper message. Recognition came with responsibility. Belonging came with service. One could not be claimed without the other. Charles had privately asked Anne to soften her approach. She refused. Charles had hoped to prevent a public rupture, but Anne's refusal to compromise forced the king into a choice he had spent years avoiding: protect family peace or defend the Crown's unwritten rules. Hours before the ceremony, Charles reportedly called Anne aside and asked for one thing: no visible confrontation. Anne agreed there would be no argument. What Charles failed to ask was whether she intended to offer Meghan the public acknowledgement the palace desperately needed. Charles understood the danger better than anyone. A single pause, glance, or missing greeting between Meghan and a senior royal could dominate the coverage and bury the purpose of the entire ceremony. He wanted restraint. No emotional displays, no private battles carried into public. Every family member, he insisted, had to remain focused on duty rather than old wounds. Anne listened, but she did not accept his meaning. To her, civility did not require false warmth. She would not create a friendly moment simply to protect the palace from difficult headlines. A greeting could be read as forgiveness. A smile could suggest the jewel dispute had been settled. Anne believed that pretending otherwise would only make the deeper problem worse. Charles warned her that Harry was already defensive. He knew his son would see any rejection of Meghan as deliberate humiliation, not quiet protocol. But Anne did not soften. She argued that years of avoiding consequences had allowed every private disagreement to return as a larger public crisis. Silence had protected no one. It had only delayed the explosion. Their exchange exposed a deeper divide between brother and sister. Charles wanted accommodation, hoping that kindness might create enough space for the family to survive another painful gathering. Anne wanted clarity. She believed duty lost its meaning when rules were bent simply because enforcing them caused emotional discomfort. Camilla quietly advised Charles not to overrule her. If Anne's decision were reversed under pressure, it would suggest that the palace's own restrictions could be changed through public tension. William said little, but he understood what was happening. This was becoming more than an argument over a jewel. It was a test of whose judgment carried weight inside the monarchy. Meanwhile, Harry received indirect assurances that the ceremony would remain respectful. He took that to mean Meghan would at least receive a formal acknowledgement. Meghan entered believing Charles had intervened, that the king had used his authority to prevent another public rejection. That belief made Anne's silence more painful. Charles watched his sister walk past Meghan, but he could not step in without making the slight impossible to ignore. Moments later, he turned toward Anne, and his expression revealed the truth. She had gone further than he expected. Charles could not challenge Anne in front of the cameras, but Harry had no such restraint, and as the ceremony moved forward, his anger began to surface in a way the palace could not disguise. The palace had arranged every royal in a precise order, but after Anne passed Meghan, Harry stepped out of his assigned position. It lasted only seconds. To the public, it looked accidental. To those inside the family, it was a direct challenge to Anne's authority. Harry moved closer to Meghan almost at once, closing the space that had been left around her and placing himself between her and the senior royals who had just denied her even the smallest sign of welcome. The shift was slight, but inside a ceremony built on rank and order, it carried enormous meaning. An aide had to adjust the movement of others without drawing attention, quietly repairing a formation that was beginning to come apart. Harry said something under his breath. Meghan answered quickly, asking him not to react. Her voice was calm, but the urgency was clear. She understood that one open argument would turn the moment into a full public crisis. Harry, however, was no longer interested in protecting the appearance of unity. Anne noticed the change. She did not turn back. That refusal was deliberate. By continuing forward, she denied Harry the confrontation he seemed ready to force and kept control of the moment through silence. William recognized what his brother had done. Without speaking openly, he attempted to guide Harry back into place. Harry resisted. To him, the formation was not harmless tradition. It was another tool. The family could use spacing, order, and protocol to isolate Meghan, then claim nothing personal had happened. Meghan stayed where she was. She would not step away, retreat, or allow herself to look pushed aside. Her stillness became its own form of resistance. Charles now faced an impossible choice. If he corrected Harry, he would appear to support Anne. If he did nothing, the planned order could collapse in front of everyone. Then Anne exchanged a brief glance with the palace aide who had handled the disputed jewel. Moments later, the aide left the public area. The timing suggested concern. Anne may have believed Harry would challenge the decision as soon as the ceremony ended. Meghan seemed to understand the same thing. Once the formal event was over, doors could close, staff could disappear, and every private route into the family could be blocked. So during the exit, she changed direction. Quietly, without drawing Harry's attention at first, Meghan moved toward the restricted corridor Anne had entered moments earlier. What began as a refusal to speak was now pulling Meghan toward a private confrontation. And behind the restricted doors waited the object Anne had worked so carefully to keep beyond her reach. Away from the ceremony, Meghan finally confronted Anne. There were no crowds, no formal smiles, and no carefully arranged distance between them. Meghan demanded to know why she had been treated like a stranger. Anne's answer cut deeper than any public insult could have. Meghan asked whether the silent walk had been meant to embarrass her or to warn everyone else that she was no longer worthy of acknowledgement. Anne did not raise her voice. She said she had refused to take part in a performance that suggested nothing had changed. In her view, A polite greeting would have been used as proof of peace when the real dispute was still unresolved. Meghan pushed back. She argued that the palace had no right to separate her memories from the objects connected to them. The jewel had become part of a moment in her life, part of her marriage, and part of a time when she believed the family had accepted her. Anne answered with the same cold certainty that had shaped every decision before the ceremony. Royal belongings carried obligations. They could not be claimed only when the emotion was useful or when the public message was powerful. Harry arrived before Meghan could respond. He accused Anne of using the late Queen's memory as a weapon, knowing no one could challenge a private instruction that had never been made public. Anne rejected the charge. She said the Queen had spoken to her directly about several sensitive items before her death. Meghan demanded to see the instructions. Anne refused. They had been private, she said, and were never meant to become evidence in a family argument. That was enough to ignite Harry's anger. He said invisible rules had always been used to control them. Whenever they asked for proof, the palace answered with silence. Whenever they challenged a decision, tradition was placed between them and the truth. Then Anne revealed what she had been holding back. The jewel had not been removed simply because Meghan requested it. Palace security had discovered that details of the possible loan had already reached an outside media contact. Someone knew about the request before the decision had even been finalized. Meghan denied leaking anything. Her anger shifted into shock. If the information had escaped, she said, someone inside the palace may have wanted her to look calculating, as though she had planned to use the jewel for attention. For the first time, Anne's certainty weakened. She admitted she did not know who had sent the message, but she knew where it had come from. Inside the royal household. The confrontation had exposed a hidden betrayal neither woman had expected, and suddenly the greatest threat was no longer the jewel, the silence, or the cameras. It was the person inside the palace who had engineered all three. For hours, the world believed the defining image was Anne walking past Meghan. Then a second camera angle emerged. It showed what happened immediately afterward, and revealed that Anne had not been watching Meghan at all. Her attention was fixed on someone standing behind her. The new recording changed the meaning of everything that had happened. Anne's eyes had moved past Meghan toward a senior palace aide positioned only a few steps away. It was the same aide connected to the handling of royal access requests, ceremonial arrangements, and the private messages exchanged between different households. Anne's expression had changed before she walked past. That detail suggested she may have realized the private dispute was being turned into a public trap. The aide appeared to signal another member of staff just as Meghan and Harry reacted, raising a dangerous possibility. The cameras may have been directed toward the encounter before it even happened. If that was true, Anne's silence had served more than one purpose. She had refused to create a false image of unity. But she may also have been stopping herself from saying something that would alert the person watching them both. For Meghan, the discovery was devastating. She had entered the ceremony expecting at least a formal greeting, because indirect assurances had led her to believe Charles had intervened. Now she began to question whether those assurances had been given so her disappointment would be captured at exactly the right moment. Harry saw something even darker. To him, the leaked request, the missing jewel, and the carefully positioned cameras formed a single plan. Someone inside the royal household had created another family spectacle. Knowing the blame would fall on Meghan and Anne before anyone searched for the real source. Charles ordered a private review, but he refused to let it become public. Admitting that the palace had lost control of its own staff could damage the crown more deeply than the original confrontation. Anne demanded that the aide be removed from all access to royal jewelry records until the truth was uncovered. The jewel remained locked away, no longer tied only to Meghan's claim. It had become evidence of manipulation, mistrust, and a betrayal hidden behind palace walls. Meghan left without the peace, without an apology, and without the public acknowledgement she had expected. But later, she reportedly received a message from Anne. It contained only a time, a private location, and a promise to reveal what the late Queen had truly instructed. Anne's silence may never have been simple rejection. It may have been the only warning she could give without exposing what she already suspected. The cameras captured Princess Anne walking past Meghan without a word. But they may also have captured the exact moment two royal women realized they were being used, and somewhere behind palace doors, the person who arranged it was still waiting for the next confrontation. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more hidden royal stories, secret palace battles, and mysteries the monarchy never wanted exposed.